In C, to collect input from a user, you can use scanf. Scanf takes in two arguments. The first parameter is a string that is used to define the format of the input to accept, and the second parameter is where the value is going to be stored in your program. So let's start off by writing int num, and then let's write scanf. Inside of here, let's just take in an integer value. So let's do %d, and then let's write the ampersand num. Ampersand collects the address of where num is stored in your memory, and it overrides the value of num with whatever you get from your user. So in this case, we have an integer, and we're going to store the value that we get from the user onto this address. Let's show you what this will print out to the console. So let's make num equal to 0, and then let's just print out the value of num. So let's do %d num. Now let's just comment out this line. Let's do Control F5. We can see we have 0. Now let's do new line, and let's put another print statement here. Print f. Let's do %p to get the address of num. So we're going to do ampersand num, and then Control F5. So this is the address in your computer where num is storing the value 0. The reason why we need to pass in ampersand num here is because we're going to pass in the address, which is this value, to tell scanf to store the number that we're collecting from the user. Let's just collect a simple number from the user. Let's clean up the code first. Let's remove this, replace it all with the semicolon, and then here let's just write out a simple prompt for the user. A prompt is telling the user to do something, so we're going to tell the user to enter a number, and then we'll get the number from the user, and then down here we'll do printf you entered, and we're going to do %d and write out num. If I try to press Control F5, we're going to get an error, and I'll show you what we're going to get. So there were build arrows. Would you like to continue? We'll just write no. So when you try to use scanf in Visual Studio, you're going to get an error down here, or not really an error, you're going to get a warning saying return value ignored scanf. So this isn't a safe type. So what Visual Studio would suggest is that you use scanf_s instead, but this is sort of specific towards Visual Studio. If you try running this in a command line, you may get other weird warnings. So to avoid this error, what you can do is at the top, very top of the file, you're going to write #define, and we're going to write out this warning right here. _CRT _secure _no, and then warnings. So this is what you can add at the top of the file to ignore this warning we're getting from the compiler. So let's do Control F5, and we could enter in a number now. So let's say 55. Enter, you entered 55. And if you notice, you don't need to put a new line here, because when you press enter, it kicks it down to a new line in the input right here. So then the next text you have will write right below it. You can also use this to collect a floating point. So we could do float, and down here we're going to have to change this to an f, because now we're taking in a floating point, not an integer. And then we can do f down here. Press Control F5 again, 0.456. Let's add 0.3 here to clean up the output so we don't get the extra zeros at the end. So let's do save it, Control F5. Now let's do 0.345. You entered 0.345. We can also use this to collect a char instead. So let's write out char. Let's update this to, we'll write C. We can say enter a single character. And here we're going to look for a char. And then here we're going to replace this with C. And we'll say you entered. And we're going to replace this with %C. And then print out our char we got. So let's do Control F5. Here let's write $. You entered the $. Let's see what happens if you try to enter in a number. Let's do 5. and still works because 5 is still a char. So remember, chars are for any single characters, basically anything on your keyboard.